Hello everyone, I'm Ren Siyu, and today I will introduce holistic editing. The, the news each day is full of the same kinds of news: accidents, criminals, business, sports, weather, and so on. After you have edited enough of each kind, you will gradually learn what needs to be in each kind of story, even the typical order in which they are presented, as well as the most common problems. So, when experienced editors read stories, they can edit more quickly because they know what to what to look for in stories of that type. As a beginning editor, we can use this chapter as a checklist of the problems, a season of the problems, to look for the various kinds of stories. And today I will talk about the accident and disaster stories, business stories, court stories, and criminal stories. In accident and disaster stories, it includes car crashes, boating accident, fires, tornadoes, floods, and so on. In these stories, you must answer the following questions, especially the who and what. Who was involved? What are the names, ages, and addresses? Are there any relatives or friends who might be able to add details to those gathered from authorities, participate, and witness? And then is what happened. What was the nature of the accident? What was the extent of injuries and damages? And less important is when did it happen, where did it happen, and how and why did it happen. The importance of what happened are following. These are more important than injuries. Injuries are more important than destroyed properties. And the destroyed properties is more important than the damaged properties, unless the injuries were slight and the destruction or damage were widespread or costly. Third, accident story leads are often in passive voice, with the victim having been killed or having been injured or the property having been damaged, rather than active voice with someone doing something to the person or properties. Once more, be sure that the description of what happened doesn't assume or imply anyone's guilty. There has not yet been a trial, so don't convict anyone for responsibility beforehand in print. Just till what charges were filled or tickets given. Next is business stories. Some common types of business stories include personal finance stories, including jobs, credit, colleges, cars, investment, and insurance, and local business features, which look at new business, earning of big local employers, big shake up with management, personality profile. First, business feature don't have to end with how-to articles, focus pieces, analyze pieces, and personality profile also play a big role in business pages, because news has the most impact when it has the power to affect people personally, in the pocketbooks, in the way they live, or in their emotions. Business news, like other kind, is most interesting when focused on people rather than things. If a business seems dull, check whether it's focused on a person acting or reacting, or merely on an abstract business topic. And pay attention to numbers in a business story. insisted that figures can be explained so readers can more easily relate to them and understand them significance and understand their significance. Also, don't let too much numbers be crammed into a lead. Pick the number that is most important to the readers, then move the others. Then move the others down. People are interested in how the news affects them, not in the figures itself. And all who edit business stories should have at least an elementary knowledge of business terms. The third part is the core stories. The most important point to remember in core story is that make sure the reporting doesn't incriminate anyone not yet convicted in court. Journalists are legally protected in reporting labels statement made in court proceedings, provided the coverage is fair and is fair. Similar statement made outside the courtroom don't receive the same protection. Consider the ethics of reporting names and addresses of victims. Names of victims generally should be not used, nor should the story give a clue to their addresses in a way by which they can be identified, especially if the I don't know how to say, if the perpetrator has not been arrested. Editors should avoid legalese to make sure most readers can understand the reportings report and make sure the headlines accurately reflect the story. An accurate story is an inaccurate headline can still pose a legal problem, especially because many readers will read only the headline and know the story. And the last part is sorry, I don't change the title. I think I save it. It's crime stories. In criminal stories, as with accident and core stories, the worst thing you can do in a criminal story is to imply someone is guilty or is guilty who hasn't been convicted. Even if police officers tells you someone is guilty as sin or the arrest solved 10 cases, such statements would convict the suspect in print. And here are some other advice for editing criminal stories. Generally, avoid gruesome photos of victims. Avoid unconscious sexism and racism, which often pop up in description of victims or suspects. Avoid printing names or addresses of young offenders or victims, as well as the victims of rape, sexual assault, or sexual abuse. Okay. And the last is a review part. So the question one is business stories should focus on things rather than the people. Can anyone answer this question? Zhao Jun. And the second question is the leads of accident stories are often in passive voice. Correct. Can you answer these questions? So which voice should we use? And I think you didn't listen to me at all. Leads of accident stories are often in passive voice is right. And we can't use active voice.
Okay, so good morning. Today we will going to discuss about one of the most interesting as well as the one of most important thing in the practice of journalism, which is writing the headline. I think most of us sitting here as media consumers, we have got used to see those bold, big type words appearing at the front page of newspaper every day. So we know they are called headline. But do you really understand what headline is? And do you know how to write it? And do you know what things can help you to write a great headline? So if you are not sure about it, so I think this presentation will be helpful to you. So the first thing we need to make clear of is that why we need a headline. So headline serves for different functions. First, definitely is to attract the reader's attention. We need a headline to hook the reader's eyes. And the second is the headline is used to summarize the story because not all readers will read the whole story. So they really need something to give them the instructions to know about the story. And the third is the headline helps the reader index the content of the page. And also, headline depicts the mood of the story as well as help the newspaper to set the tone. So those are 5 basic functions of a headline. And usually in a newspaper, it's a copy editor who is in charge of writing the headline. So if you want to be an expert of writing headline, you can try to become a copy editor in your future career. So before we start to learn how to write headline, we first need to know some headline terminology. So let me introduce this to you. So first, main head. What is a main head? If there is only one headline of a story, it's usually just called a headline. But occasionally, the headline will be more than 1 or 2 lines, even 3 or 4 lines. So if there are more than 1 line, the headline that makes the main point is the main head. And another thing we need to know is the second deck. So if the story has more than 1 headline, the second deck adds additional details or different angle beyond what it said in the main head. So don't confuse the second deck with the second line of a main head. So here are some instructions for you to distinguish them. The first is the second deck will be a sentence of its own and not just merely a continuation of a sentence in the main head. And the second deck will be normally will be given in a lighter type space than the main head, and sometimes it will be italic. So here is an example. Boarding wall crumbles. So definitely that's the main head of the headline. And the beginning of the end of communism. This is a second deck. So this is an example. Okay, let's move on. The next thing is hammer. A hammer is normally a label head, typically 1 to 3 words long, above a main head. So when a story has a hammer, the hammer is in bold type, and the font face normally is bigger than the main head. So the hammer is used to give the readers, let them know what's the feature of the story. For example, here, U.S. attacked, that's a hammer, and hijacked jets destroyed Twin Towers and hit Pentagon in Day of Terror, that is main head. So this is an example of hammer and the main head. And another thing is kicker. So like a hammer, kicker is also a label head, but it has more words, up to 5 or more. But with the kicker, the main head is the bold one, while the kicker is smaller, normally only half the point of the main head, and is in lighter type. So for example here, you can see the homes receive personal touch, let's say it's a kicker. And the fake it store helps improve quarters, that's the main head. But in today's media environment, kickers are much less common today because The kickers usually are smaller ones, but reader prefer to first read the bigger type, but then the smaller type. So that actually is not what designer want. So yeah, the kicker just appears less in today's media environment. Okay, so now we come to this part: how to write a great headline. The headline writing process normally involves two critical steps. First, selecting which details to use, and the second, phrasing the headline properly within the space available. When dealing with selecting which details to use, the keyword method is the common method that most copy editors use. So you have to ask yourself, which words must be included in the headline to convey the reader the meaning of the story, which is, so what details you can't miss. And in its simplest form, this involves answering the question, who does that? Yeah, like some 5W and 1H. So it's just like all the great headlines looks like a great sentence. Yeah, so a headline will have subject and a predicate, and usually a direct object. And when dealing with limited space, synonyms may be necessary to shorten the phrase, and more concise word may help, because you will encounter some situation that you write a great headline is very long, but the space is limited. You can't really fit it into it. So this is a tip for you to deal with this problem. So here's an example. The first headline: tornado strikes Jonesboro. It's okay, it's acceptable, it's a good headline, but perhaps it's just a bit long. So if you want to shorten that, another option is for you: Twisters tips Jonesboro. You just use synonyms. You use the similar verbs. It conveys the same meaning, but the second headline obviously is shorter than the first one. So as a copy editor, we must understand the laws of newspaper readership. Yeah. It's sad, but we have to admit that the average reader does not read the average news story. Yeah. You readers won't read every story in your newspaper. So when you read a headline, you just need to assume the reader won't read it. Yeah, the problem which many has in the newspaper is that the copy editor has forgotten that he or she have the benefit of already read the story, but the readers don't. So too many headlines by beginners read just like weak titles in the term papers. So that won't do. So here, if you are trying to write a good headline, here is tip for you. So after you have written a headline, forgot what you know about the story, and you just directly look at headline, and you ask yourself whether you have a clear meaning simply by reading the headline about what the story it is. If you do, then you success. But if you don't, perhaps you need to rewrite your headline. And a good headline needs to tell readers how their life will be affected. This is understandable. Helpline shares stories in many ways. Yeah, but often they do so by focusing on how the reader's life will be affected, because people always care about themselves. So, for example, if the city council has approved a city budget of 30 million for the coming year, one approach to write a headline is that way. So, council approves 30 million budget. Okay, it's acceptable. It's a good headline. It tells the story, but it could be better if you transfer it like this. City tax rate to remain unchanged. So there are differences among those two headlines. The first one, when you first look at the headline, you just might think it's a draggy, a boring political story. But when you read the second headline, you will know, oh, it's related to my life. So yeah, my life will be affected by that. So I will be interested to look at that. So yeah, just take note. Tell readers how their life will be affected. And Also, a good headline helps readers determine what not to read. So most headlines that appear over news story are designed to inform, but not to entertain. So headlines that simply summarize the story as concisely and accurately as possible is the headline we are most seen in the newspaper. For example, U.S.-China to sign major grain deal. The headline like this won't receive prize. It's very simple. But a newspaper full of headlines that get straight to the point is a newspaper that's easy for readers to read. So the readers know what the story is about and can make an intelligent decision about whether to read them. Yeah. You need to help the readers to determine whether they want to read a story by writing an accurate, concise headline. And there are several things you need to take care of when you're writing a headline. First, don't overstate. Headlines should not go beyond the story, failing to give the qualifications contained in the story or confusing fact with speculations. Yeah, so for example here, West Louisville students at UL to get more aid. It's a headline. But if the lead said they may get it, it's not confirmed. You can't just write the headline like this. Yeah, it's an overstate. And also, don't command the reader. So, which means you can't begin your headline with a verb. Because headline begin with a verb like a command directly sent to the reader. So for example, save 8 from fire by another school life. Yeah, it's just like you are commanding someone, and readers won't feel comfortable with that. And another thing you need to take care of is avoid editorializing. So although limited of space in the headline we understand that there is limited space in the newspaper to contain a headline, but it's inappropriate to eliminate necessary attribution or qualifications and to use the loaded terms such as sucks, corpse, and deathbeds to describe the participants. So this results in an editorialized headline. So even one loaded terms will distort the story. So for example, if Syria, for reasons it can justify, turns down a compromise plan offered by the US concerning the Golan Heights problem. So if you write a headline like this, Syria spurns US compromise. So the headline actually creates a negative attitude among readers when it proclaims. So you really need to take care of that. Be objective and don't editorializing. And you also need to avoid sensationalizing. This is a common problem for journalists. Sensationalizing occurs when the headline writer spots headline writer spots a minor sensational element in the story and use it in the head. So I think readers today, media consumers today, are really tired of sensationalizing. So in Chinese environment, media environment, we always see headline like shock, a big shock at the beginning. But after you click into it, you find out that the news is just a boring, a document, an empty one. It will be nothing interesting to read. So avoid sensationalizing. It will. I don't really think readers will prefer to read sensationalized headline today. And here are some additional tips for you to write a great headline. So first, remember the headline and other big type may be all the readers will read. So get the keywords and be specific as possible in presenting the news. And the second one is try to match the tone of the story in headline. Yeah, this is an important thing. A light story demands a light headline. A tragic story should not have a headline as a pun. So you can't write you can't write a headline for an accident, for a car accident, like "Hooray! 30 people dead." So that's not appropriate. It's unacceptable. And also, you need to make sure the headline is accurate. Don't exaggerate or mislead. If you have some problem in your headline that is with some inaccurate issues, it's better for you to reread the story and try to make a new one. Yeah. So that's all of my presentation. And here is the most interesting part, interesting quiz. So first question, which of the following is a function of headline? Who knows? I think it's quite easy, quite obvious. Yeah, C, summarize the story. Headline is not used to distract readers, or also not to mislead readers, also not to make the readers confused. It has to summarize the story. Okay, so a hammer is usually smaller than the manhead. True or false? Yeah, false. A hammer is normally should be bigger than the manhead. Then the last one, beginning a headline with a verb is recommended. True or false? Yeah, it's quite easy. Beginning a headline with a verb is not recommended. Yeah, it's true. You can't begin a headline with a verb because it sounds like a comment. And yeah, that's all for my presentation. Thank you.
Okay, that last presentation was excellent, by the way. I hope you were paying attention because headlining is one of the hardest things to do. And that was covered very thoroughly and appropriately. We kind of, let me get the projection going up here again. I'm not sure that I could have done any better than that. That was very, very well done. And so actually I might take his and recommend it to all the students rather than just our group here. I doubt that anybody else is going to do any better than that, but we'll see. I'm going to just go ahead and bring up real quickly my work from yesterday, just to do a very quick review of it. Including the part that I finished last night, and just emphasize a couple of things. But again, there will be a video that covers everything I did, step by step. And so if any of you are struggling, you really have no excuse for not doing a pretty good job, because this, my video pretty much shows you how to do it. The only thing I would expect is that you will not copy me. You will not have the same design as I have. There's lots of different designs you can have. So let me see, I'm going to stretch out this box here. Okay, so this again is the front page. I did finish it up. I ended up boxing the story down in the lower right also, so I have two boxes on the page, which I try to, well, I try to avoid it, but I went ahead and made this one a 1 point line around the big one, and a 0.5 point line around the smaller one. So they didn't look exactly the same, and of course they're separated mostly by and large. I went ahead and with this one down here, I did not put I still have a little room here. I decided it would make sense to do a subtitle, a subheadline, or as which uses a deck headline. But we should try to do as many subheadlines as you can. That is the norm in today's newspapers, is to give people enough information. Everything that was said in the last presentation is appropriate as far as you're basically summarizing the story, but summarizing it in a way that makes it interesting to them. And so the deck head or the subheadline gives additional information so they can skim the newspaper quickly. Because the average American now is down to like 5 minutes a day reading their newspaper. So if they're subscribing at all, which many of them are no longer subscribing, if they're subscribing at all anymore, they don't read the whole newspaper anywhere close to it.
And so the graphics, the headline, the subheadline all allow them to skim through the paper very quickly and decide which stories they want to read. And then and even those, they may not read the whole story. And so that's kind of the theory nowadays in design, is give them lots of information that they can look at very quickly. You want to make it pleasing. This page, we end up with more than a golden triangle. We have a lot of photos on this, so it gets their eyes going back and forth. I don't think an excessive amount of graphics, but it is possible, I think, to be excessive with all of your graphics. I've seen some pages that made me dizzy to look at, basically. I don't think this one does that. We're a little bit light in the lower left-hand corner. I probably, if I were to make a change right now, I'd put this half-column mug of this runner further, probably over in the second column, to bring the eyes back over into that area. But other than that, it is a little bit heavy to the right, for sure. But enough graphics around, and again, headlines are graphics, and subheadlines are additional graphics. Drop caps in both of the boxed stories are also a type of graphic. I did not take the time to do any pull-out quote or anything. Maybe I should demonstrate how to do that, but that'd probably be next when you get back from your break. I'll get into not that it's necessarily all that difficult. You've seen them before, and I think you have an idea now how to do it. But anyway, we'll talk about it when you get back from break. The main thing, let me go ahead and zoom in here a little closer. So looking at the headline, since we were kind of talking about first off. So key map students jostle with parking. Students say not enough room for cars near campus. I'm going to jump over to page 2 now, though, and see, and okay, one of the things that some people will get mixed up on, because they're not going to listen to me, is I now consider best practices is to write a brand new headline for page 2, based on the information on page 2. And so this is the headline on page 1. If we go to page 2 and find that story on page 2, we will, it's all the way on the bottom because there's not much story left. Student received ticket after double parking to get to exam. That should be receives, so it should be, because it should be present tense. In fact, I'll change it right now, but in the video it will be wrong. I kind of got tired and wanted to get done last night. So again, emphasizing this point is that past events are supposed to be worded in present tense verbs in a headline. Future events are used the infinitive, to receive, to decide, something like that. But anyway, so we have a brand new headline on page 2. Student receives ticket after double parking to get exam. And what I experienced, I explained in the lecture the other day, is that when my competing newspaper, the daily newspaper, I was then, after I quit working there, I went in competition with them. They started using this, and I considered it, they kept getting me to get into stories that I would ignore on page 1, and then when I saw it on page 2, the new headline would catch my interest. And so they actually got me into the story with their page 2 headline, that their page 1 headline did not get my attention adequately or get my interest adequately. So I decided that if they were doing that to me, they must be doing that to other people as well. And so the thing that connects the stories is the jump line. So this slug is what we would call it, parking in this case, should be the same on page 1 and page 2. So in page 1, it's parking continues on page 2, and on page 2, it's parking continues from page 1. That links the two stories, but I want a new headline. That I consider as best practices, so that's what I'm asking you to do. If we go back to page 1 again, maybe look at another one. So the very bottom story here was about the hiking. KeyMap alumnus establishes new hiking club for community. This was the last story I put on after we released from class. So I had that headline there, and hiking continues on page 2. It ended up being the top story on page 2 because it had the most content left to go. So hiking continues from page 1. But now in this part of the story, the person they're quoting, who happens to be another KeyMap student and where I used to teach, hikers feel positive vibes from mountains. And so that was, I highlighted that part because that came from the second part. The part on page 2 carried that idea. And so again, a reader might decide, kind of boring on page 1, and then they're kind of depressed or whatever. They read the page 2 headline. Oh, I want to read that. Maybe that'd do me some good to go hiking in the mountains. And so having a different headline on page 2, I have found to be a very positive thing. And it was not my idea. It was my competitor's idea. And I think it was a good one. So in each case here, I end up jumping 4 stories. You don't have to. If you find a good place to stop the story, you can go ahead and do that. I could have probably, and you don't, let me go back up to Control 0 here so you can see the page. You can leave it like that. Each story should be rectangular or modular, but you don't need to worry about the whole page ending up modular. So what we do with the rest of the page is not my problem, it's not your problem for this assignment. Okay? In the next assignment, it will be your problem. You will fill page 2 in your major assignment 3, but it's going to be a tabloid, and so it's actually going to be your biggest problem is going to be how to cut probably in your tabloid, because a tabloid is only equivalent to 1 page of broadsheet. And so the fact that I have this much extra type for my assignment, for myself, means I've got a problem when I get to a tabloid. I only have enough room in a tabloid for 2 pages is the equivalent, as I said, to 1 page of a broadsheet. So I'm way over on when I go to a tabloid. You may think you have, well, anyway, in your jump, just leave it. Every story should be put in appropriately with this headline and with the jump line. And if you have some extra photos, if you have time, put them in, make it look nice. But all you're required to do is just, I want to see that you know how to jump, that the text itself is jumping. So if I come in here and I hit Control, let me do this, this one here, that's fine. Control A here. If I go up to page 1, it should also have selected the text here. So I will very quickly be able to tell whether your boxes on page 1 and 2 are linked. That's all I have to do is click in either box and hit Control A and see that it's selected everything in both boxes. So that's important that you have them linked together. I show in the video how to do that. So it's now in my example, you can copy me or you can do it differently. But what I did was before I started page 2, I drew boxes out here on the side, and I put the jump. I wanted to see how much jump there was, because when it finally got down to it, actually this story here only had like 1 line left on it. And so I saw by putting the additional text box up here and linking this with the text box out here, that it made no sense to jump that story for 1 line. So I went ahead and reduced the text in here and made it all fit on page 1. So there are some advantages to creating your jump box over here first, and then all I did was just drag that jump box down to page 2. Now that's one way of doing it, but you can put your jump boxes on page 2 and link them directly that way. But it may be easier for you to see, and also easier for you to plan your page 2 if you see how much jump you have, and even know whether or not you need whether you need to jump a story. And if you're trying to cut a story, if you decide, I don't want to jump 4 stories to page 2, I want to do the minimum and jump 1 story, then having your text out here on the side, you can now read your story and see, okay, where do I cut this story in order to keep it on page 1? And so doing the original jump box right next to page 1 has a number of advantages. And then if you decide to jump to page 2, you can just drag the whole box down to page 2, and you're ready to design page 2. You understand what I'm saying? You get that? So in other words, it wasn't divided into columns yet, but in essence, this box here was created right up here next to this story, so I could see how much text was left with it. And by the fact that I had the text box originally next to the story on page 1, also told me, okay, I have by far more text with this story with this last story, this hiking story, than I have with anything else. So I'm going to put that at the top of the page because it will take up more space. It just seems better to put the longest part up at the top. And I certainly would not have wanted to, design-wise, would have been terrible if I decided to put this story on top of page 1, because that was the top, on top of page 2. It was the top story on page 1. And so some people like to go in the same order, and there's some logic to that. But how do I make this story here, or how do I design my page if this is my top story? There's just not enough story there to make my top story. I could maybe make a 1-column story and then put another big story next to it, and I considered doing that. But in the end, it just made more sense to put the biggest story, or the story with the most text left in it, and a photo. There were basically 2 of them are pretty close. Maybe I should have put the second one at the top and the top one in the second spot. I don't know, that's debatable. But they're both at the top of the page anyway. And then put the stories that didn't have much text left at the bottom, and just not worry about, I could have put like this one here on the holiday. I could have put another photo in there, but it's not required for this assignment. So I didn't want to overdo and make you feel like you had to do more than you have to do. As it is, I did more than you have to do. Okay, you just have to jump 1 story, but you do have to, if you're only going to jump 1 story, you have to end the stories on page 1. You have to finish your editing. That means you need to find a good place to end at the end of a sentence, and it needs to feel like it's complete. And if you can't find if you feel like you can't, there's just not enough, that you haven't finished the story, then you need to maybe jump more than 1 story. So in my case, I could have probably kept these bottom 2 stories on page 1. I didn't jump that much. And it may have been that I could have ended one of these other ones too, just because they're such feature type stories. And this one is a little bit more of actually the only hard news story, if you can call it that at all, is the parking story. And that's the one with the least jump. And so that's the one I probably could have most easily, although that has the story about the kid getting a ticket and having to pay a fine because he double parked and ran into his exam. So that is a good part of the story. So that may be the one I'd want to jump. These other ones, being more feature-oriented, are easier to cut. You don't necessarily need to talk about the positive vibes in the mountain. So I could have cut that if I wanted to. So anyway, the headlines, again, present tense, hikers feel, present tense, positive vibes from the mountains, returning coach enjoys 7-1 record with Titans, present tense, down here, ancient holiday continues to celebrate beginning of spring. Again, these are all, page 2 headlines, but all new headlines and all, again, written, trying to find some interesting angle I can. Again, I'm going to come down in this area. You're trying to add, as was said in this past presentation, something interesting and additional information in the subheadline or deck head. Key map athletes seek to revive school's American football team. Subhead, former star player returns to shepherd efforts Oops, to restore. Okay, I got in a hurry there too. So anyway, I'll change that later. But yeah, made a mistake there in a hurry. And by the way, do double check everything when you're done. You'll get in a hurry also, just like I did. And so go, let it, try to get it done and give yourself a day to go back and then look at it with fresh eyes, just like I said with stories, when you're editing a story, including your own story. Try to give yourself a little bit of time to get to now go back and look at it like you weren't yourself, like you were somebody else. And so you can catch those things. I knew what I wanted to say, and I was in a hurry, and I thought I said it, and I didn't say it. So now I can catch it and correct it. So you have the rest of the period to go ahead and work on your stuff. I'm not sure, we've applied for a new, I need to call FISA because I'm a little, let me ask this question of you all. How many of you would like to stay in here and do some work after this class, after this? Anybody here planning to stay and do any work here? Because FISA said basically if anybody wants to download the Quark into their own computer, they can go catch her in her office over in A5. Everybody know where she's at in the equipment room on what would be the first floor of A5? 112, yeah, 112. So if anybody still needs to download Quark into their own computer, they can go, she asked if you just go over there and get her. So she apparently is not planning to come here, and unless somebody is planning, what we've asked, and I was hoping to get permission by now, was to have about half of our open time next door in the Windows left. And so we submitted a new schedule to Academic Affairs asking for some time in there for those of you who want to use Windows. But it hadn't been approved yet. So that's why I think she's a little bit confused as how to proceed. My expectation was that she'd proceed with our old schedule and come here. But if nobody's going to stay here and work on the Apple computers, then I won't ask her to come. But I'll probably wait a little bit and see if anybody else happens to come. But otherwise, if you want to download Quark, you can go to her office in 112 of the A5 building. Any other questions? Anything that you guys, if you're dead set not using the Apples and you didn't bring your laptops and you want to leave, then you could. Or if you want to meet with your teams to consider what else you can do to prepare your stories and so forth, you can meet with your team. But I wanted to give you this time to start working on it. As you've seen, it doesn't take a lot of time to do this assignment, but yeah, it may take you, well, my estimate would be 4 to 6 hours for you guys. It probably, my talking while I was doing it, I probably took more time last night than I took in class. Maybe I was more tired, I don't know. But doing the jump taking stuff, I was trying to explain stuff and how to do the jump, and so I was doing a lot of talking as I was trying to show that to you. So the second video might well be 2 hours. I don't even know. I'll go find out. But it should be done processing by now. I don't know. It does look like it's done. Anyway, so I'll tell you how long it is in a second after I have a chance to stop this and check the timing of it. But anyway, so you have the rest of the hour. And if you need some help or want some personal, some advice on it, I need to be a little bit reluctant. Somebody did come yesterday and showed me, she was already done with both pages, actually. So she decided not to wait around. But she made a lot of mistakes by trying to do it very quickly. I had to kind of do some additional training because she should have been watching my video, and then she probably would have done hers a little better by listening to my explanation in my demonstration. But anyway, you should be able to, even if you don't get anything done between now and when you come back, you'll basically have 10 days when you get back. In fact, I've rescheduled to where it's not due until Monday night. After the Monday night, a week after you come back. So it's not due the Monday night you get back, or a week after you get back. So you in essence have about 10 days once you get back to finish this. And you need somewhere between 4 and 6 hours to do it, as long as your editing's done. If you're trying to do your editing while you're doing it, then I can't. That's a whole other thing. But as long as you get your editing done, and so all you have to do is what I was doing. You know what photos you have. You know, you maybe make some pre-selection. These are the best photos. These are the ones I want to use. Do remember, actually, the person that showed me her page yesterday, she seemed to have it just exactly flipped backwards, and every picture she used was a boring picture. Every picture she used was staring at the camera picture. That is the opposite of my philosophy of photojournalism. So, when I was doing this, I was looking for the most interesting photos that I could find, not the ones staring at the camera. Now, on page 2, I did use one, basically staring at the camera, because it only had, it had another action picture, but it's almost exactly like the first one. So I decided, well, I'll put it lower on the page. It's on the jump page. But the staring at the camera picture is my lowest priority. That's, to me, only interested it's only of interest to people in the picture and their relatives. Nobody else is interested in this picture. Maybe their friends, I guess. Friends, relatives, and the people in the picture. Those are the only people interested in a look at the camera picture. And so, if I didn't make that clear before, let me make it clear now. If I see that you have a better picture and you're running a stare at the camera picture, you're going to be downgraded. We haven't had a chance to go into a lot of detail in about pictures, but that much, hopefully, you can understand. This one was, again, still the second best of that story, and it's not exactly a stare at the camera. In fact, she's not even looking at the camera. She's looking down. But it was still, she's up in the mountains having a snack, and it was my second best story. I didn't have a choice. That or nothing, basically. I guess you could say this is staring at the camera, but from so far away, again, not the essential part of the picture. So, try to avoid the pictures of staring at the camera if you can. Some of the pictures you took were definitely staring at the camera pictures, and so you don't have an option. That's all that you have are pictures staring at the camera. Especially if they're just head and shoulders. A lot of you didn't want to try to avoid that stare at the camera. You have to get them talking and take a picture while they're talking. So you ask them a question that you don't need to take notes on, and you take the picture while they're answering your question. Basically, is what you have to do to keep people from just staring at the camera. And maybe I didn't explain that tactic well enough, but that's in essence what you have to do to keep them from staring at the camera. Okay, anything else? So if you can meet with your teams, you can work on this, and if you have nothing to do, you can go. Okay, thank you. I'll be here for those that want some help. I'll be here to the end of the class to help. Uh-oh, we have a monitor here. We're in trouble.